In Titanfall, speed is everything. Speed gets you ahead of the game. Speed makes you crazy.
This fucking focusing fucking bitch ass hoe ass bitch suck my fucking.
And most importantly, speed is life.
But I want to play in a Titan, and aren't they kinda slow?
Say hello to Ronin. If you're itching for speed and lethality, Ronin's gonna be your guy. Sitting in the Strider class, Ronin boasts the fastest sprint speed and lowest health pool among the Titans. I'm sure you all know about Ronin's kit since you're trying to play him, but just in case you have dementia, I'll do a quick recap. Ronin's primary weapon is basically a big-ass EVA 8. Just like the EVA, the lead wall fires 8 pellets per shot, but instead of having a square spread, the lead wall shoots in a rectangular pattern. The lead wall also only has 4 shots, and when you reload, you load all your shells at once.
Nice.
Ronin's ordnance ability is called Arc Wave. As the name suggests, Ronin creates a wave of electricity that travels for a short distance. On contact, the recipient takes a good chunk of damage and becomes slowed. The arc can also travel through multiple enemies and can also be held indefinitely until released or melee cancelled. However, if a Titan currently has shield, the slow effect will not be applied. Next, we've got Ronin's Phase Dash. Think the Phase Shift Tactical in Wraith from Apex Legends. It's basically the same as those abilities, but you dash forward when you phase. And finally, probably the big reason why you want to play this Titan is, well, the giant ass sword. Oh, I'm gonna burp. The broadsword is a unique melee. In addition to having a cool-ass animation, Ronin's melee does more damage and has a bigger range than the other Titans. This sword isn't just good for offense either. His defensive ability, Sword Block... Okay, it's not the most interesting ability for sure, but it is super useful. When held down, you can block 70% of oncoming damage. That's right, 70%. We'll talk about that later though, since we're going to talk about the final part of this kit, the Sword Core. When activated, Ronin and his sword become massively empowered. What does this mean exactly? Well, for starters, the recharge speed of your boost is massively increased. Coupled with the fact that Ronin by default has 2 dashes,
Think fast, Chuckle Nuts!
Arcwave's damage is increased and can now one-shot pilots. Sword Block's damage reduction is increased from 70% to 85%. And finally, your sword now does triple the amount of damage it used to per swing. For context, that's enough to down a full health North Star in about 4 swings. So, you may be wondering, why are you talking about playstyle now? Shouldn't you talk about kits next since, you just talked about his weapons and stuff? No? Okay, well, the real answer is, before I talk about the kits, I think it's better to understand the fundamental playstyle of Ronin first, since kits can directly change how you play as a result. It'll make explaining the kits easier anyway. So how should you play a Ronin? Step 1. Be a bitch. Step 2. Repeat step 1. Jokes aside, Ronin isn't a Titan you should be charging in as. At only 3 bars of health, maintaining a good amount for combat is crucial. That's why it's important to always be on the move. It's pretty much a universal rule of this game. Standing still equals you are dead, not big surprise. And as you're moving around the map, make sure you keep at least 1 dash in the tank, cause you'll never know when you need it. Now when you first drop in as Ronin, you have one main objective. Kill any pilots and minions you see. You see a dot on the map?
Kill it.
Whenever you kill something, you're guaranteed at least 1% of your core. Now, it may not sound like much, but when you only have 3 bars of health, getting your core off is crucial if you want maximum value off your Titan. So again, every little bit helps. For minions, 1 swing of the sword is more than enough, but when you face a Reaper, I recommend stunning it first with an Arc Wave and then unloading with your shotgun. The reason why I use an Arc Wave and not just my shotgun is because stunning the Reaper allows me to kill it easily without sustaining any unnecessary damage. As for pilots, it depends on the situation. For about 70-80% of the time, your pilot kills should be with your sword. The remaining 20% should be with your shotgun, and maybe the occasional Arc Wave. Remember, your melee range is huge compared to the other Titans, and it's often surprising seeing just how much range it has. Combined with your speed, Ronin is one of the best Titans for chasing and snuffing pilots out. However, if the pilot is just out of reach, you have another option, your shotgun. Surprisingly enough, most people forget that Ronin has a shotgun, whether or not you're on the receiving end. Now for Arcwave, I typically advise using it against pilots, since it's very important for engaging Titans, and it doesn't even one-shot pilots anyway. But if there are no enemy Titans in the field at the time, then I'd say just do whatever you want with it. Now, what happens when there's a pilot just out of your reach? What then? Again, always be moving. Don't get tunnel vision on a single pilot. Staying in a general area to kill one dude just invites more trouble than it's worth. You'll end up taking unnecessary damage, and in the time it'll take for you to kill that one dude, you probably could have got around the map and killed 2 or 3 other pilots along with some minions. And now, let's talk about how you typically want to approach Titan combat. For playing Ronin, you want to do 4 things. Scout, engage,
Free crack!
retreat,
Keep it moving, guys!
evaluate. Otherwise known as Seer. When you scout as Ronin, try to pick up as much information as you can before you engage. Here are a few key questions to pick up on. How many Titans are there on the field? What Titan am I about to face? Where is their attention focused right now? And most importantly, is engaging a viable option? Ronin has the luxury of being able to choose most of his fights. Being a hit-and-run flanker, Ronin has the means to get in, do a bunch of major burst damage, and then get the fuck out. The key part to this is always make sure you give more damage than you receive. If you think you're in a good scenario to do that, then let's move to step 2. Engage. Fun fact, it's easier to kill your enemy when they're not facing you. Ronin has the best means to achieve this, so whenever possible, make sure your opponent is facing the opposite direction, or at least not paying attention to you. By doing this, you have the opportunity to unload your shotgun and get out before the enemy even knows you're there.
Huh?
Now you may ask, did they just turn around and shoot ya? Well, no shit, Sherlock, but there are ways to mitigate that. And this is where the Arcwave comes in. Now, the Arcwave has 2 primary functions for use, engaging and disengaging. Whatever you use it for is up to you, because some people swear one tactic rather than the other. I personally like engaging with it, but again, just do whatever floats your boat. But, no matter how you use it, it is crucial for you to use it against Titans, as it slows down their aim and movement speed. And, you know, the extra damage doesn't hurt. So, now that you've delivered your payload of 4 meat shots to the objective, what's next? I hope you saved your dashes, because you're gonna need them. The key to Ronin is cycling your cooldowns for vicious burst attacks, and now that you've exhausted your shotgun and Arcwave, it's time to move. This is where your sword block and phase dash come in handy. Phase dash acts as, well, an extra dash. So essentially Ronin comes with 3 dashes in total. These dashes are your ticket out of the fight, so don't be afraid to use all of them in order to get away. Losing line of sight is important, and in order to minimize the damage, you should also try to sneak in some sword block here and there. Just be careful though, since sword block slows you down. And now that you've gotten away, it's time to evaluate. Ask yourself, did I get any value from that fight? How much health did I lose? How many more exchanges before I can get my core? This information will be vital for how you approach your next fight. Basically, the more HP you lose, the more efficient and careful you have to be. And just like with pilots, don't get tunnel vision. If there's a Titan on the opposite end of the map that you can't approach, well, then don't approach them. Remember, the best thing about Ronin is that he can choose his best fights most of the time. Don't force yourself into an unfavorable situation just because you see an enemy and you want to kill him. If you repeat the steps above, you'll find yourself staying alive and getting more cores off a lot more frequently. And speaking of core, let's talk about how best to utilize it. Like I said before, Sword Core empowers pretty much every part of Ronin's kit. Now, when you activate it, your first instinct may be to go unga bunga on everyone, but this ain't the Stone Age. For most, Ronin charging at them head on is pretty much an easy way to get a free kill. So, how do you avoid that? Simple. Flank. Just like you did with a shotgun, flanking's the name of the game. However, a core is a core. You can't just get 1 or 2 hits in and then run away. That would be a complete waste. So, there lies the question. How do you use the sword core and live another day? Well, do you remember the sword block? When you rush a Titan with sword core, the first instinct is to shoot you and to use their cooldowns in order to put you down as fast as they can. The key is utilizing sword block to mitigate all that heavy damage, and when they're reloading, that is the perfect time to go ham on them. If utilized correctly, sword core can become one of the most reliable cores in the game for damage and kills.
Wow!
However, be careful. Sword core does have a major flaw. There's this weird mechanic in the game that's called melee pinning. Basically, if a Titan hits another Titan with their melee, the player who got hit first will have their melee attack completely cancelled. Now, depending on which side you're on, this can become useful. This mechanic though can be disastrous for the sword core because pretty often veteran players use this to constantly cancel Ronin swings and thus pretty much negate your sword core with little to no effort. My advice is to move unpredictably between swings to occasionally delay your swings so that you don't get caught in the cycle. Now, let's get a bit more specific. As you already know, there are different titans out there with their own strengths and weaknesses. So let's talk about them and how they stack up against our boy Ronin. And before I dive in, remember, this list is based on what I've personally experienced as Ronin. After all, everything is pretty much subjective, and I'm just here to give you a guideline. So without further ado, let's move on to the first titan.
Engaging hostile titan. Calculating consumption for main weapon.
Ion is a jack of all trades, therefore it's hard to say whether or not this is a good matchup. I will lean towards this being a bad matchup though, because oh boy, an Ion that actually knows what they're doing is annoying, to say the least. For starters, their laser shot and tripwires are decent deterrents for front pushes and flanks. These by themselves aren't too much of a hassle to deal with because you can shoot the tripwire and also block the laser shot with your sword. The real problem is the vortex shield. One-on-one, this thing can completely ruin a push. If you whiff all your shots into the shield, well, have fun getting that shit flung back at you. The reason why this is so punishing for Ronin is that his gun has a long reload time. If none of your shots hit, well, you kind of just went in for nothing. With no shots left, you've got to retreat. Meanwhile, all Ion has to do is put a shield up at the right time and then just shoot at you when you run. My advice for going up against an Ion is to focus on flanking so that they don't have time to put up their shield before you unload on them. And if they do manage to get their shield up, try to sneak in a melee or two just so you can get some guaranteed damage before you retreat. As for Ion's laser core, it's actually pretty easy to deal with. Just move from side to side as you sword block and you'll do just fine.
Engaging hostile titan, priming offensive thermal systems.
Contrary to probably what you've seen online, Scorch is actually a pretty easy target to kill as a Ronin. Remember, you have a shotgun. Meaning, you don't have to get right up in a Scorch's face to do damage. Scorchers will often try to charge at you in order to burn you with their flame shield. Now, that's good and all, but they have one problem. They are fat. So, unless you somehow get flanked by a Scorch or trapped, realistically, the flame shield is never a problem due to your mobility. Scorch's weapon also has a long downtime, so you can actually take advantage of this and just constantly bully him out of his effective range and whittle him down. So yeah, basically just watch for the flames and just pelt him with your shotgun. As for his flame core, it's pretty easy to avoid if you have your phase dash available.
Did you pray today?
Nope.
Oh, and don't use sword core on him because he'll just melt your face off.
Engaging hostile titan. Railgun at maximum power.
North Star is also a pretty easy titan to fight. All you really have to do is get all the way up in her face. Besides tether traps, she doesn't really have a way to escape once you get close. Be careful though, even if you sword block, a fully charged snipe from her gun will still do a decent chunk of damage, so make sure you end her quickly. And as for her flight core, just bob and weave as you dodge.
Engaging hostile titan, closing for the kill.
As a whole, Ronin shouldn't really be dueling other Ronins. Due to the playstyle of the Ronin, duels can sometimes really be awkward to fight in. If you do have to face a Ronin, again, always try to get the drop on them first. And then it's just a matter of blocking all their shots with your sword, and while they're reloading, you shoot back. But again, I personally don't recommend trying to 1v1 a Ronin, since good Ronins will tend to stall each other and not really do anything. For sword core, don't bother blocking since melee is the only thing that your sword, ironically enough, can't block. If they're closing in on you fast, try to arc wave to slow them down as much as you can while you back off. When they do get in range, remember to melee them back in order to try to melee loop them so that they can't get the maximum damage off their core.
Engaging hostile titan, 40mm arm to paint and destroy.
Just like North Star, Tone is pretty easy pickings. Their arc wave destroys their shield wall in one swing, and their primary weapon deals pitiful amounts of damage. The most important thing to remember when facing Tone is if you know they have a lock on you, make sure you block in time so that their missile burst doesn't deal full damage. As for Salvo Core, just block, phase, and move erratically.
Engaging enemy titan, optimizing ammo feed efficiency.
Legion is never a titan you want to face head on. His gun and power shot will absolutely shred you even if you block. However, his slow speed is what makes him manageable. Just flank, hit your shots as fast as you can, get out, and repeat until dead. And for Smart Core, just move. Just move away.
Come, we fight like men.
No!
Pilot, I am engaging a hostile Titan. XO-16 armed to kill.
And finally, we've got the Queen herself. For any Titan in the game, it's important to always target the Monarch before they get their upgrades off. That being said, Ronin doesn't exactly fare the best against her. Just like Legion, Monarch is not a Titan you want to face head on. Her gun does decent damage at long ranges and is good enough to pressure your block. Her Rocket Salvo also does decent damage, and the Energy Siphon is, well, basically a massive cock block. Oh yeah, it wasn't enough that the Siphon could slow you down, but of course it also has to generate shields, which, you know, negate the slow effect of your arc wave. And for some reason, she's got an ability that refreshes the cooldowns of her other abilities. And, her fucking dash? Let's talk about her upgrades as well. In my experience, the one upgrade core that you want to avoid the most is the Maelstrom. The smoke's extra damage is no laughing matter and can completely kill a push if you go in too deep. My best advice to being a Monarch is to try to save a sword core for her, specifically, since she can be a massive pain to deal with otherwise. Her kit naturally just plays against yours, and without sword core, she'll eventually just wear you down. So yeah, pretty much avoid her unless you're close to getting your core, because otherwise, you run the risk of feeding her and making her stronger. So now that you, hopefully, understand the gist of playing Ronin, let's talk about the kits. For Titan kits, most of the time, there's really only going to be two options you want to go with, Turbo Engine and Overcore. Assault Chip is all around pretty terrible for Ronin since the AI is relatively simple and will just mindlessly follow you. Stealth Auto Eject is okay. I mean, if you're tired of getting goosed out of the air by Titans, it's an alright pick, but it really doesn't offer any benefit to the Titan itself. While auto-ejecting sounds good in concept, it really just hinders your efficiency with the Titan. As a general tip, you want to stay in your Titan for as long as you can before you eject, just so you can get max value. Nuclear ejection is kind of a mean pick, but in certain niche situations, Ronin's speed and phase dash can allow for some sneaky bombs. It isn't really consistent though, so I tend to avoid it. Counter Ready is a pretty consistent pick, but as Ronin, you really shouldn't be getting rodeoed so often to warrant an extra smoke. Now, Overcore is pretty good. Combined with a battery, Ronin is able to have 40% core right off the rip. So even if you do mess up a bit, you still got a decent chance to get your core before you die. And maybe if this guy came out a year or two ago, I would say that Overcore would be your best pick for a Titan kit. But as we all, hopefully, do, we grow and change as people. Let me introduce you to my beloved Turbo Engine. At first glance, an extra dash may not seem like that much, but I can't stress enough how important speed is. Remember, Ronin's only got 3 bars of health. If you're not sword blocking or positioning correctly, your mistakes are so easily punishable. With 1 extra dash on the belt though, it's surprising to see how much it can actually help you in terms of performance. That extra dash could be the difference between killing a pilot, executing a Titan, or just simply getting away. And as I grew more skilled with Ronin, I found that I could just as consistently gain core as I did with Overcore. My advice is, if you're new to Ronin, start with Overcore, and as you gradually become better, that's when you can make the switch to Turbo Engine. Now, let's talk about Ronin's specific kits. Ricochet rounds suck. There's really no point to running this, because most of the time, you're going to be using your sword on pilots anyway, and I don't really see any scenarios in which you would be using this against a Titan. Come on, is it this thing? How much closer do I have to get this? Do I shoot from here? Temporal Anomaly is pretty decent. It shortens your phase dash cooldown from 12 to 8 seconds. If you find that you want to get into more damage more often, this is a good pick for aggressive players since it allows you to burst more often. Highlander is pretty bad. While extending your sword core through kills is a pretty big upside, it encourages a really bad playstyle. Remember, Ronin is a hit and run Titan. Get in and get out. Highlander promotes the exact opposite of that, and it leans into the brain-dead style of just swinging your sword. It also kind of restricts your core usage because you'll usually want at least 2 enemy Titans on the ground in order to gain any benefit from it. There is one niche use for it though. If you're playing Frontier Defense, then this is a must pick since your core can pretty much last the entire round. Phase Reflex is also pretty bad. It's basically just Stealth Auto Eject 2.0. The only time I would even consider running this kit is to just troll with Nuclear Eject. Otherwise, it kinda just sucks. And last but not least is Thunderstorm. I consider this to be Ronin's best kit for a couple of reasons. With 2 charges, you don't have to worry about using Arc Wave to engage or disengage, because you can do both now. And well, extra damage is extra damage. And even if you don't want to use both charges on a single enemy, you still have the extra insurance of having another Arc Wave. So depending on how you use them, you can become more of a passive, but harder hitting burst attacker, or you can use that extra charge to keep hunting opponents after you use the first one. I'll typically switch between these playstyles depending on the situation. However, overall, I think Thunderstorm benefits from a more passive playstyle since it encourages you to commit more to an Arc Wave. And for the Titanfall kit, there's no wrong answer. Dome Shield is always reliable, but Warfall and Ronin does have its upsides. Before you call in your Ronin, if you manage to get behind enemy lines, it's a good idea to call it then using Warfall. The reason why you would want to do this is because this saves you from having to navigate as a big beefy Titan for those juicy flanks. Also, being able to get in your Titan earlier is always a plus. If you do plan on running Warpfall though, I highly suggest you also run Phase Embark, since Warpfall does leave your Titan pretty vulnerable on the drop as a result. Now it's time for the spicy stuff. Tip number 1, Phase Boost. Phase Boost is one of the fundamentals for Ronin techs. Basically, after you do a regular dash, you want to phase dash as soon as possible. This results in the Ronin traveling faster and further than a regular old dash. This technique is very useful for engaging, disengaging, or moving around the map more quickly. Tip number 2, battery cloning. If you're getting rodeoed right before the pilot pulls out your battery, you'll want to phase dash. This results in a kind of weird interaction. You'll negate the damage the pilot does to you, but strangely enough, the pilot will still get a battery. If you kill the pilot fast enough before they get away, then boom, a free battery. Tip number 3, electro phasing. When you phase dash through enemies, you can actually still deploy your electric smoke while phasing. Now, it may seem stupid to use electric smoke offensively, but hear me out. As Ronin, you can pretty much outrun or kill any pilot that's trying to rodeo you, and even if one does get on you, you can just phase dash to negate the damage and get the battery back. That's why I really have no problem using my electric smoke whenever I can. On top of the extra damage, most Titans won't really expect it, and combined with Arc Wave, it can be pretty easy for a Titan to lose sight of you. Tip number 4, always be blocking. Blocking is very important to Ronin, since it basically doubles his effective health while active. Sword Block is actually so good that you can actually survive a nuclear ejection and an accidental phase dash into an enemy. Tip number 5,
Kill everything.
Now that may seem like a no-brainer, but Ronin's speed and sword makes him the best Titan for farming pilots and minions. Many people tend to ignore the AIs and attrition because obviously pilots and Titans give more points. But if you really want to start winning more, then you have to focus everything. I mean, there's literally no downside to it. You gain points, and no matter if you're a pilot or Titan, you're gaining at least a percentage of your meter, so what gives? Now, of course, I'm not telling you to focus solely on bullying the poor grunts, but that doesn't mean you should ignore them either. If you can spare the attention, then you might as well kill them. It'll go a long way. And yeah, that's basically Ronin. If you're a fellow Ronin main, feel free to comment any extra tips and tricks down below. I also want to thank you guys for getting me to over 500 subscribers! Next Titanfall guide video will probably be on Ion, and I plan on releasing that in the coming month or so. But anyways, thanks again for watching my videos, and yeah, that's about it.